In this video, I'm going to walk you through some of the tools that you can use to manipulate form in Rhino. So I've opened the file that was something you could download from the instructions, and I'm going to walk you through each of these steps. I'm in the perspective view in the upper right here, and you'll see that there are some words written next to each of these boxes. These are basically the tools or the commands that you're going to be using to manipulate each of them. In preparation to perform some of these operations, one thing you may want to do is zoom in closer to the particular box that you're working with. So in this upper right one, I've already kind of got it in, centered and a little bit larger than when it started. One quick way to do this is to click on the box and type zoom. And then for the options, choose selected, and it will zoom in right into that particular object. So I can go and do that in each of these windows. Selected, maybe zoom out just a little bit. And I'll do it in the upper left one too. Zoom, selected. So now you can kind of see what you're doing a little bit more easily. All right, this first command that we're going to use is called move edge. So I'm just going to type in move, and then I'll look for edge as one of the command options. And I'll pick this front edge. You could pick any edge of this object, and I'll press enter. And then it's going to ask for a base point. So I'll pick this point at the end of that front edge. And now I have the option of being able to shift it, in one direction or the other. Now, one thing you'll notice is that if you go to some of these other views, you can control which direction it's being shifted. So for example, if I go to the front view here, this is allowing me to shift it vertically. If I go to the right view, I can shift it to the left or the right. So basically the idea is that you can kind of choose the viewport that helps you to control the direction that it goes. All right, and then click the second time to accept that option or that choice and placement. Now the next one I'll do is the second one here in the line of boxes. And I'm just going to, again, get each of these viewports sort of set up so I can see more easily what's going on. So I'm shifting around. So this one here is the one that I'm going to manipulate with this tool. Before I enter into the boss command, I'm going to make a shape on the side of this, and I'll use the drawing tools for this. So I've clicked on the rectangle tool, and I'm just going to snap to this lower corner here. Now, as you can see, it's going to default to that horizontal plane. If I want to make it, a box or a square or rectangle on the side, I need to go to one of the other viewports. So I'm going down to the right viewport so I can put it on that right side. And you could be specific about the dimensions of this, but basically we just want to get a little practice in working with the various commands. So I'm just going to click on a point. Okay. So now this rectangle is situated on the right side, and I'm just going to move it away a little bit from that form. I'll just shift it over here. Okay, so now I have this floating rectangle. Now is where I would use the boss command. So at the command line, I'm going to enter boss, and I'm going to select, it says here, select a planar closed curve to boss. And I didn't mention this in the first video, and perhaps I should have. For some reason, and it has to do with the way that the program is set up, it interprets a curve, whether it is something made up of straight lines or not, as any of those kinds of objects are considered to be curves. So you may ask, well, wait a second, this isn't a curve that I'm trying to use the boss command with. But anyway, just be aware of the fact that when it says that, it's asking for any of these two-dimensional elements. So the curve that I'm going to select is this rectangle, and then I'm going to press enter. And then it's going to ask me to select a boundary. So I'll choose this box. And as you can see, it's kind of filled in the space between the rectangle, which by the way is still present. And it's, you know, when I click on it, you can see it's asking me, what do you want to select, the curve or the poly surface? The poly surface is this 3D object. The curve is the rectangle that I started with. Okay, so when would this be useful? Well, I don't know, maybe you want to have a surface that has a kind of raised pattern. So you could make, let's say, an array of circles or something on the surface of something, pull those circles away, and then use the boss command to create this kind of three-dimensional texture. Next, we'll be doing a command called shell. So I'll get all my viewports kind of set up here. Shell, and I will go ahead and initiate the shell operation. But one thing I want to mention before I do this is these boxes right now, if I type in DIST to check a distance, you can sort of see how high they are. This vertical height is 18 feet. So, you know, this is basically like maybe a 2-story building, just to give you a sense of the scale of things. So I'm going to type in shell, and then it's going to ask me to select the faces to remove. So I can, you know, choose any of the faces. Right now the thickness is set to 1, so it should make the thickness of the planes that are left over 1 foot thick. And I'll go ahead and select a few of these sides. I'll do the top and the side one, and then press enter. You know, so you can see you can pretty quickly generate a space using that tool, and then proceed to make other openings and things like that. And that is shell. The next operation will be this one called wire cut. Now in this command, I'm going to show you how to use something called a wire cut tool. But before we do that, we are going to create a polyline, which is going to serve as the line that gets cut through the object. So the line I'll make will be a kind of jaggedy plane. So in order to make this polyline, go up to the polyline tool, and let's say I want to make the wire cut polyline on this side of the box. So right now I've got nearest turned on, and by the way, you may want to turn that off later, because when it's set to nearest, it will go to pretty much anything, everything, and sometimes that is not very helpful. But for the time being, I'm going to put it on nearest, and I'm going to turn off ortho and grid snap, and I will proceed with creating this polyline. Now, one thing you want to be careful of is that it is placing it on the plane that you want it to be on. So I'm down in the right viewport, but I want to make sure that it's on that plane. And as you can see in looking at the other viewports, it's snapping to some point off of the plane. So I'm going to click on planar, and now I'm going to proceed with making this polyline. And keep an eye on the other viewports and just make sure that it is in fact all constructing the polyline in the same plane. Otherwise the wire cut will not work. Okay, so there I go. I've got my polyline created, and then I'll use the wire cut to basically cut that line through the entire box. Okay, so at the command line, you're going to type in wire cut. All right, what's it asking for first? The cutting curves. So I'm going to click on this polyline that I created, and I'm done selecting. So I'll press enter. Now it's going to ask me to select the objects to cut. I choose the box and I press enter. And I can either define the depth of it, or I can press enter again to cut all the way through the object. So I'll press enter, and it's now made these two elements. Now, one thing I want to back up a little bit, because you may encounter this when you go through this command. If I hit wire cut, select the wire, select the polyline, press enter, pick the object I want to cut through. You probably want to check the default. This where it says keep all should say yes. That means it'll keep both pieces, both sides of the cut. Right now I just changed it to no, and now I'm going to change it back to yes. And I'll go ahead and press enter. Okay, so now I've got these two sides, and just to kind of make this a little bit more clear, when you submit this file, I'm going to use the gumball, and I'm going to just pull it away a little bit so that we can see there is this gap between the two pieces. All right, the next one in the line is extrude. So I'll get all my viewports set up. And we're basically just going to extrude one face of the box. Command line, instead of extrude curve, because that would just take basically a polyline or an actual curve or a line, and it will just make a single surface. I want to extrude the surface, right? So I'm going to select the side here, and I'm going to press enter. And then I'm going to give it a distance. So I'll just say 4, but before I do that, I want to, just be aware that there are different options in here that will control the output of this extrusion. Right now it says solid no, and so basically I would just get this kind of hollow extrusion. If I click on solid, it will produce a solid extrusion. So I'm just going to, now it's asking for the extrusion distance. I'll put 4, and that's going to be 4 feet, and press enter. So now I have, it's made this extrusion. Right now it's not attached. You could always join those pieces if you wanted to. Okay, our next manipulation tool is going to be the taper tool. So I'll get these all aligned in the center, and I will type in taper at the command line. Select objects to taper. Let's taper this box. Right, now you can control how it tapers. I mean, maybe you want it to taper to a center point, but I'm going to show you how to taper it with this back corner being the axis that remains fixed. So I'm done selecting the objects I want to taper, and it's going to ask me for the taper axis. So I'll click on these 2 points, the bottom and top of that back corner. And now it's going to ask me for the start distance. So in other words, the kind of dimension that's not going to change, right? And I will make that the bottom here it will remain as it is, and we'll taper the top of it. So I'll go ahead and click on this front corner here. And by default, it's going to make this kind of curvy taper shape. If you want it to be straight, you would go and select the infinite tool. And as you can see, it's generating straight lines there. And I'll just go ahead and click on the midpoint. I'm also going to turn off the nearest object snap. You may or may not need to do that, but you'll see if it's producing the forms in the following portions of the tutorial to make that determination, or just turn it off. All right, next we have the shear command. So the shear command, go ahead and type that in, and I'll show you how to shear in 2 different axes. So select object to shear. I'm going to shear this box, and I'm going to do the first one in the right view. So I'll pick the bottom corner and then the top corner. And then I'll perform a shear manipulation in that right plane. Okay, so again, you kind of want to move to the different viewports to control the direction of the shear. So now if I did a shear, picking the same box, and this time I will pick this top front point and the back front point, and I will run the shear towards the right. Okay, so you can see two different ways of producing that change in form. Okay, we'll go to the next one. The next one is twist. Now with the twist command, I've got all the viewports set up here. There are, like all these other operations, different ways of controlling how the twist works. You could, for example, type in twist, and I'll use that same back corner as the sort of fixed edge. It won't make any changes. All the twisting will happen around the other ones. Click at the bottom, click at the top. Now you could just input a degree of rotation. So let's say I did 25 degrees and pressed enter. You can see that that corner stayed fixed and the rest of the object rotated in a 25-degree turn. But you can snap to other points on the object to generate certain kinds of geometry. So let's say I want to do twist again, press enter, click on 2 points here. And this time what I could do would be to use a reference point. So I'm going to pick this upper right-hand corner here. And then I'm going to come over to the top view and select another point. It's the midpoint of that. That point could be anywhere on that top edge, and it's going to produce a slightly different twist. Okay, the next one that we'll do is this one called fold face. So with fold face, there are, like the other commands, a number of options that you have for controlling the direction and shape of the form. I'm going to show you one example before doing the one that looks like the tutorial. If I select this top surface, and then it's going to ask me for the fold axis. So let's say I pick the midpoint on both sides. Okay, so that's going to make a fold along that line that I just created. And now I can sort of specify an angle. The tutorial example has a 90-degree fold face condition. But let's say I just pick arbitrarily some point out here on the side. Okay, so you can see it's controlling the kind of direction and the axis of the fold. So if I just pick another point here, and then I press enter, it's generated that that angled plane. For the second fold face, I'm going to type in fold face. I'm going to select the face here, and I'm going to choose the top midpoint and the bottom midpoint. For my angle of first reference, I'm going to input this point in the far corner. And for my second reference point, I'm going to guide by the way, I turned back on ortho so I can get a 90-degree angle. So I'll click out towards the right and press enter, right? So that generates the fold form. And you can play around with different ways of folding it and how your selection of points and the input of angles has an impact on the outcome of the form. Right. Our next one is going to be split face and extrude surface. So a couple of commands in the same process. So let's get all these lined up. So the first part of this command is the split face. So I'm going to type split face, and I'll select this side here. and then press enter. And then I'm just going to make the axis in the middle. You could make it off to one side, or it could be a diagonal, but it wants to be on the same plane here. So I'll click on the midpoint here and the midpoint down here, and then I'll press enter. So what's happened is it's created a kind of two separate planes that are joined at this line. And then from here, to sort of illustrate this more through, a 3D manipulation, we'll extrude the surface similar to the way we did the one a few steps back. So I'm going to do extrude, and I will look for extrude surface. I'll choose the back surface here. You can see it's kind of cut that plane in half. I'll press enter. And then I will give it the same distance, and you'll notice that solid is set to yes. Press enter. Right, so now we have these two forms. And again, those could be joined. All right, the last one we have here is one called bend. So I'm going to type in bend, select the object to bend, pick 2 points. I'll choose the top midpoint and the bottom midpoint here, and then I'll type in A for angle, bend angle, and I'll type in 30. And you can experiment with different angle degrees. Okay, and you also want to kind of determine which side you want it to bend. So I'm down here in the front view, and if I wanted to make it bend toward the right there, I'll just click somewhere over on the right side. And that's it for all of your shapes. So you're gonna zoom out, make a screenshot of this upper right view from the lower right condition, and then rotate around. If you can, get a little bit of the top view of that and make another screenshot.